everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Jen Steltzer. I'm the Manager of Community Sustainability Programs at EnviroCentre. We are very excited to have Raymond Leury with us today. He is the President of EVCO. But for those of you who don't know us, EnviroCentre is a nonprofit environmental organization based here in Ottawa. Our core mission supports sustainable lifestyles, which means that we encourage people to take action on climate in their own lives, in their homes, in their workplaces and business, their communities, and right here in the city. Our work focuses on four key areas: green homes, green transportation, green business, and green lifestyle. Today, we're here to talk about green transportation in Ottawa, and specifically zero emissions, low carbon transportation. But before we get started, we have a few logistical notes. Please note this is being recorded, this session, and we will be able to share it online after the event. We ask that you remain muted throughout so we can all hear Raymond and his presentation. And we'll be monitoring questions in the chat box. Feel free to ask them in French or English, and we'll be addressing those at the end of Raymond's presentation. So let me tell you a little bit about Raymond. He's semi-retired, and he had a career as an IT consultant for over 25 years, consulting to both private and public sector clients throughout Canada and the United States. The last 18 years he spent working for Microsoft, culminating in the position of principal consultant. Raymond has always been interested in environmental issues, and that has led him to purchase an EV 7 years ago and to get involved with EV owners groups in Ottawa and beyond, really. And he now occupies the position of president for the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa, which we all call EVCO around here. Raymond attended Al Gore's Climate Reality Project Leadership Corps, which reignited his passion for environmental issues, in particular, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. He's a bit of a regular around EnviroCentre. We work with him quite often over the years. He splits his time between advocating for EVs, talking climate change, and volunteering with the Red Cross. And to my surprise, he's recently helping with the COVID-19 effort. So double thanks for that, Raymond. That's really special. So once again, I do want to invite Raymond to share the floor, and I'm really looking forward to your presentation.
Well, thanks very much, Jen. I'll share my screen here. So again, my name is Raymond Leury, and I'm the president of Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa, and we'll talk about what that is in a future slide. Let me just get to the next slide here. Can I move forward? Yes. So we'll talk, I'll introduce EVCO, and then we'll talk about the different types of zero emission vehicles that are out there. So the idea today is to talk about the ownership experience. And so to be able to talk about that a bit more intelligently, if I could put it that way, we'll discuss the different types of zero emission vehicles, and then we'll focus on specifically electric vehicles for the most part. So we'll talk about the differences between ICE is internal combustion engine and EV is electric vehicles. So we'll talk about the differences between those. And then we'll talk about fueling, which is the thing or one of the things that's the most different with electric vehicles. So we'll talk about what that's like at home and what that's like on the road. Then we'll cover one of the myths about EVs, and we'll leave some time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So EVCO has been around since 1983, so almost 40 years now. Originally, EVCO was a group of very techie people who were very interested in converting gas cars to electric vehicles. And throughout its history, it's held some workshops to do that. And several members have done conversions. And actually, we have members who have been driving electric vehicles for well over 20 years. Today, though, there are a lot of electric options available on the market, and they are less expensive than doing a conversion. So we've gone away from doing conversions, and what we're doing is focusing on spreading the news about EVs, talking about their advantages and why people should be driving electric vehicles. We are particularly concerned about the GHG emissions related to personal vehicles and other types of vehicles. So we've done some work on electric buses and heavy duty vehicles that we foresee going to electric at some point in the future. So we'd like to accelerate the electrification of the transportation system. So that's essentially what we're doing at EVCO. We do meet once a month. Our next meeting is tonight, actually, at 8 o'clock. Normally at 7:30 on the the last Monday of the month. So today we have the regular meeting at 8 o'clock. So, and if you want some information on that, you could go on our website at evco.ca and you'll see how to join us for the meeting. So, types of EVs, so or ZEVs, so zero emission vehicles, right? So the first type I want to cover is hydrogen fuel cell. There was actually a question today on Facebook to a post that Jen put out there. And we believe that hydrogen fuel cell is not practical for light vehicles, and we could talk about that more during the question period if you have questions on that. And they're not truly zero emissions because the majority of hydrogen these days is produced using natural gas, which means that there is still some CO2 emissions. But the main reason they're not practical is cost, and I could cover that if people have some questions later. I just want to mention here that there is something called a conventional hybrid. So if you look at the original Toyota Prius and various other models on there, those are hybrids. We do not consider them electric vehicles because they do not have the capability of being plugged in. So they don't have a capability of running on electric only for any distance. So we used to have a Toyota Highlander hybrid, and it ran, if we were very careful, we could do about 2 kilometers with it electric only, and that was it. So we're talking about actually the next two types, which the first one is a plug-in hybrid. So this is similar to the conventional hybrid in that there is an internal combustion engine in the vehicle, but there's also a battery that will allow you to run typically from 20 to 90 kilometers. It depends on a number of factors, but typically that's the type of distance. Now, once you run out of electricity, what these will do is they will automatically switch to the gasoline engine that will produce electricity to power the wheels. So there's different subtypes which I will not cover, but just to give you some examples, there's a Chrysler Pacifica, which is the only minivan available in Canada right now that's electrified and has a pretty good range, so it's a good choice if you're looking for a minivan. The Toyota Prius Prime, so the Prime line in Toyota, those are plug-in hybrid vehicles. They have a range of somewhere around 40 kilometers on electric, and then they switch to the gas vehicle. These are not really zero emissions. So we believe also that because these vehicles have both an electric motor and a gas engine, that eventually they will disappear because they're more expensive to build than just an electric vehicle. The issue right now with electric vehicles is the cost of the batteries, but the cost is coming down. So we're expecting in the future to have the last type as the only type really that's going to be left on the market. So those are BEVs, so battery electric vehicles. And those are fully electric. They have ranges as low as 160 or 170 kilometers, but as high as 640 or so kilometers, depending on the vehicle. So some examples there, the Nissan Leaf, it's been in market for almost 10 years, I guess, 8 or 9 years now. The Chevy Bolt was the first affordable long-range battery electric vehicle, and all the Tesla models are also fully electric. And there are many other models available. We have actually, at the end, I have a link in the resources section that will show you a table that's that's got most of the, it's mostly up to date. It's not quite 100% up to date, but gives you a good idea of what's available right now in market in Canada. So what are the differences? So the differences between an EV and an internal combustion engine are in really three categories. So if you look at the driving, it's almost the same in that, you know, you have a steering wheel and you have an accelerator and a brake pedal, all these things. The big difference though is that when you remove your foot off the accelerator in one of these vehicles, they will start, the vehicle will start slowing down, and that's due to regenerative braking. And the idea with the regenerative braking, sorry about mumbling those words there, is that instead of using the kinetic energy that the vehicle has and using brakes to generate heat and waste that energy, electric vehicles, what they will do, and this applies to plug-in hybrids and conventional hybrids, they will regenerate electricity with that kinetic energy. Okay, so essentially, they're running the electric motor in reverse, and instead of consuming energy, they're putting energy back into the battery. There's a couple of advantages with that. The biggest advantage is that that gives you more range. So because you're not wasting that energy, you're getting most of it back. You'll be able to use that energy again to accelerate or move the vehicle further along in your trip. And many vehicles have what's referred to as one pedal driving. There's some vehicles like the newer Leaf and the Bolt where it's possible to use only the accelerator pedal to drive the vehicle completely. It will stop fast enough on regenerative braking that you don't need to use the brakes. Okay. The other big difference is maintenance. Maintenance on electric vehicles is a lot less than on internal combustion vehicles. The main reason is that an internal combustion engine has got somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 moving parts. It really depends on the vehicle. And electric vehicles have 20 to 30 moving parts, sometimes less than that. So with less moving parts, less friction, less opportunities for things to break down. There's no oil changes, no tune-ups, no exhaust system to change, et cetera, et cetera. So there are many less parts. Many systems that are not required on electric vehicles just will not need maintenance because they're not required, right? One example is brakes. So brakes typically last 4 to 5 times longer on an electric vehicle. And the reason for that, again, goes back to the regenerative braking. So since the brakes aren't used very much, the brakes last much longer. My own electric vehicle has got 260,000 kilometers on it. So 260,000 kilometers, and I'm on the original brakes. Okay, and the brakes are still good for probably several more years. I'm not sure. We'll see how long they last, but they're still working really well. So the other difference then, which is somewhat related to all these things above, is the operating costs. So maintenance is a lot less because of less moving parts and all that. And also the fuel that you're using, so the electricity that you're using instead of gas or diesel is somewhere between 75 to 80% less than the equivalent gasoline or diesel. So the fuel costs much less in Ontario as much as in Quebec, and we could, if you have questions on that, we could certainly answer those after. So the operating costs are much lower. The purchase cost currently is higher, but as we'll see later, there is a purchase incentive available from the federal government of $5,000, and if you're in Quebec, there's an up to $8,000 purchase incentive in Quebec. Okay. So in terms of advantages, I have a funny story with my daughter. When she used to live with us, she would go out with her friends and go shopping and all that, and come back and you know, park the car in the garage when we had a gas car. And what would happen is, well, she wouldn't fill up the car when she came back home, even if that little red light was on, right? When we got an electric car, that changed. So I happened to go play hockey at 6:30 in the morning, and when it's you know, when it's really early in the morning like that, I don't get up earlier than I need to. So I'm always in a rush getting to hockey. And a few times I had that red light turn on, and it was a bit of a challenge. Talking about range anxiety, I didn't know if I had enough range to get to the gas station, let alone get to the hockey game. So when you have an electric car, typically what you do is you charge it at home the majority of times, 95% or more of the time I charge at home. And what I do is very simple. I get home, I plug it in, and I go inside, and the next morning it's charged up for me, right? So no worries about having to pump gas at -20 or in sleet and snow and wind and all that. The car is always ready to go the next morning. Preheating and pre-cooling. So the advantage there is that most of the cars have got some remote applications. Now with conventional vehicles, internal combustion engines, there are remote starters and all that that will allow you to do something like this. However, you're burning fuel when you're doing that. So with an electric car, you're just running the heating system or the cooling system, which is a lot better. You're not producing greenhouse gases doing that. Many cars, including mine, they learn your habits and they will precondition the car automatically for you. So they learn when you go to work and when you come back from work, and then they will precondition the car 15 or so minutes before your normal work day ends. So that's pretty cool. The other advantage, which we touched on before, is there's less maintenance. But from the point of view of someone who doesn't know vehicles very much, like in my case, I'm lucky I was able to take a auto mechanic course in high school in grade 10. It was a lot of fun actually. So I know how vehicles work, and I could do a lot of my own maintenance. And it's pretty hard for a mechanic to tell me something that doesn't make sense. So, but for someone, the majority of us these days who don't know very much about vehicles, especially as they're becoming more complicated, because there's less maintenance, less of these parts that could break. There's a less of an issue with a mechanic telling you that you need to change something that maybe in the end doesn't really need to be changed. Less. It's like going to the dentist, right? You want to avoid that. Going to the mechanic is one of the things that I like to avoid. Even though I know something about vehicles. So that's the advantages. So if you look at charging, really at home, there's two options. On the left, there's something referred to as level 1. And on the right-hand side, there's level 2. So level 1 is essentially a regular 120 volt outlet. So one of our members has been driving electric for more than 20 years. They now have 2 electric cars, and they've never used anything but a regular outlet to charge their cars. Okay, so it is possible. Depends on how much you drive. Depends on your hours of when you would drive and all that. But it's quite possible to charge your car on a 120 volt outlet for all of your needs. It's certainly local driving. Driving on the highway is a different story. We'll talk about that after. So, but most of us who have electric vehicles, what we do is we install a level 2 charger, which is something similar to what you see in the middle there with a little Siemens logo on it. So in my case, I have 2 electric vehicles. So I have 2 chargers in the garage, and it makes it very convenient for me to charge. So the level 2 chargers are 240 volt. And they will go up to 80 amps, but typically they're about 30 amps, and they will charge somewhere around 30 to 40 kilometers an hour of charge. Okay, so if you want 400 kilometers of charge, it'll take 10 hours type of thing. Okay, so it's much faster than level 1. It's also more efficient, so it costs you less in electricity with the level 2 charging. Okay, so that's what you would do at home. The connector you see in the middle at the bottom there, the J1772 connector, is a connector that works with every single vehicle on the market in North America today. The Teslas have an adapter to work with the J1772. So if you have one of these chargers at home, you'll be able to charge any vehicle that's out there in the market. Okay. Now, when you're doing charging on long trips and you're looking for more rapid charging, there's something that some people refer to as level 3, but in fact it's more properly called DC fast charging. And those stations, there's maps. We'll show you maps after how you could find them. But those stations are a bit different in terms of compatibility for charging. There are two standards for non-Tesla vehicles that have been around for some time. On the left-hand side, there's something called CHAdeMO, which has been used by the Japanese and the Korean manufacturers. And on the right-hand side, there's something called the CSS, we refer to it as CSS combo. That standard has been used by just about everybody else. So what we're seeing is that the Japanese are now changing to CSS combo, and we're seeing a move towards standardization with CSS combo. In Europe, they've already legislated that. So every vehicle, including Teslas, have to have a CSS combo port. So Europe is going to that. I don't see any reasons why we wouldn't do the same thing. This is similar to the beta versus VHS debate in many ways. Actually, the CHAdeMO's got some capabilities that the CSS doesn't currently have. So it's very similar, but CSS combo is winning out, and that's good for everybody because it will make charging much easier. Now, if you go to a fast charger, a non-Tesla fast charger today, you will always find at least one CHAdeMO adapter, and you'll find one or more CSS combos. Okay, so typically every place that you would have fast charging would support both standards. Now, in the Tesla world, it's a bit different. So this is the plug for the Tesla. You see it's smaller, quite a bit smaller than the other ones. And Tesla, for historical reasons, Tesla did their own design, which wasn't adopted by other manufacturers for a bunch of reasons. But Tesla needed a high capacity plug that they would be able to deploy many years ago, because they've been doing high capacity fast charging for a long time. So bottom line, Tesla is using, in North America, they're using this plug. Like I said before, if you're doing level 2 charging with a J1772 plug, the Teslas come with an adapter that will allow you to bridge the two, so you could use those level 2 chargers to charge up your Tesla. The Tesla superchargers, though, only support this particular plug. That's in North America. In Europe, that's different. In Europe, they're now using CSS combo. So again, I believe that in North America, we're going to see a change towards CSS combo with all manufacturers, including Tesla. Okay. So that's the charging landscape. In most cases, people charge, like I said earlier, for the vast majority of times, they will charge at home. Now, the myth that I wanted to talk about is that there aren't enough chargers available, right? So a lot of people think that, well, you know, if I need to go to Toronto, there's nowhere I could charge up. So, you know, I can't have an electric car because my grandmother lives in Toronto and I go and visit her once or twice a year, and, you know, I won't be able to get there. Well, first is there are many, many chargers out there, and there are more being deployed all the time. If you go to certain parts of the country, Quebec and New Brunswick in particular, you'd be even better served than Ontario. Ontario is a bit of a laggard compared to those two provinces, particularly Quebec. But depending on where you're going, you will find lots of options to charge electric vehicles. If you're doing a trip where you could stay overnight somewhere, well, that makes it even easier, because you could potentially use level 1 charging. So if you're staying at your grandmother's place, you could plug it in her plug if she has one. There are 120 volt plug, or there are some level 2 chargers and fast chargers available, and we'll see that in a moment. So there are a lot of chargers out there. And just to give you an example, this is a map from a site called PlugShare. So PlugShare is probably the best site to tell you where the charges are. And if you look at the map here, this is a map that includes, it's kind of hard because it's hidden over all the dots, but it has Ottawa on the upper right hand corner, and it's got Toronto somewhere in the lower left-hand corner. And all the things that look like gas stations there that are in sort of an orangey color, those are high-speed chargers. The ones in green are the level 2 chargers. Okay, so you can see that there are a lot of them out there, and there's more being deployed all the time. Okay, there is PlugShare will help you find these chargers. They have chargers from every different network of charging that's out there. So it makes it relatively easy to find chargers. There's also an application called a Better Route Planner, which I have a link to in the resource section, that will tell you, will help you plan a trip if you need to plan a trip for a longer distance. This map here is the map of the Tesla superchargers. And actually, there's something else called destination chargers there. So the blackish ones are destination chargers. Those are the level 2 chargers. They're typically at hotels or locations like that where you'd stay a long time. And all the red dots with a like a what do you call that there? Electrical thing there on it. The ones that don't have the service or the Tesla logo. All the other ones, they're Tesla superchargers, and typically a Tesla supercharger will have 6 or more chargers in one location. There are some that have a few more in really remote locations, but typically in larger centers, 6 is the smallest that I've seen. I've seen some that are over 20 stalls. So there's plenty of charging available for Teslas. These are only usable by Tesla vehicles. So and the app inside the Tesla makes it very easy to use these chargers, because it's got, it will do the planning for you. So if you tell the car that you want to go to, I don't know, Niagara Falls or something, it will tell you which road to take and will tell you where to stop and for how long to stop to charge your vehicle. So it makes it very, very easy. Now, there is an app, and actually I think I have it here. So a Better Route Planner, which I just mentioned before, that app will allow you to also do some planning, and it's actually better than the Tesla app itself, even for Teslas, because it takes into account climate conditions. So if it's very cold in the winter, we'll take that into account. So it gives you a better plan than what you would get from your own vehicle in Tesla. But it supports every vehicle out there. You tell it which vehicle you have, where you want to go, and it will tell you which places where to drive and where to stop to get charged up. So these are the resources I have. So I mentioned before our site, evco.ca. That's where you would get the information for the meeting tonight, and that's where you would get information on other things that we're up to. PlugShare, that's the map that I showed a few slides ago. Great map to help you understand where things are. If you want to have a list of available vehicles on our website, at that link there is a list that was built in May of this year. It's a bit out of date, but it's mostly accurate. There are a lot of vehicles coming out soon, though, that are not on that list, and we'll be updating the list soon. But that gives you a good idea. It also has the prices, it has the range, and various other data about each of the vehicles. The last thing I want to mention is that the federal government is offering up to $5,000 rebates on eligible EVs. I mentioned that briefly earlier. So you could take advantage of that. And if you're in Quebec, you would get another up to $8,000 depending on the vehicle you purchase. So Jen, I don't know if how we're doing for time, but that concludes the formal part of the presentation.
Well, that's wonderful. And I think it's a really great presentation. I see we have a few questions in our chat box. So let's start the conversation with those questions. I think, Mandy, if you could read those out one at a time to Raymond. Let's start with that. And then, of course, I always have a long list of questions as well. But let's see where the conversation goes. Great amount of information. I think you really hit on a couple of big myths there about the charging station situation, right? Like you don't actually need a charger every 10 kilometers to get yourself along. That's a big one, as you saw from you know, when we look at the wonderful world of social media, people are still really concerned about that. I definitely saw a question that had to do with battery range. So maybe we could start with that particularly, Mandy.
The first question that we got was, is manufacturing catching up to demand for BEV?
That's an interesting question. I think the answer to that is a bit more complicated than just manufacturing catching up. I think that in Canada, one of the issues we're facing right now is that manufacturers in Ontario, as an example, Quebec and BC are a bit different because they've got some levels of ZEV mandates there. In Ontario, if you're Nissan, as an example, you have no incentive to sell an electric vehicle. Okay, so why would they bring them here, right? So they're not bringing large quantities. We've seen some reasonable quantities lately, but they're not bringing as many as they could. And that's the same with all the manufacturers. So if you look at various other vehicles out there, there aren't very many available on dealers' lots, which makes it hard to buy them. Now, we believe the big reason for that is because if you look at, again, Nissan as an example, well, they have to sell to other markets like Europe, where they do require, in some jurisdictions, a minimum amount of zero-emission vehicles, or provide credits for selling those vehicles. So if Nissan is going to sell a Leaf, they would probably make more money selling it in Europe than they would here. Okay, so the other effect is that the prices are high here. Okay, if you've looked at prices for certain vehicles, we see that in certain jurisdictions, some states in the US in particular, some EVs are being discounted significantly because the manufacturers are looking to get the credits for selling zero-emission vehicles. Right, so are the manufacturers ramping up? Well, the other thing that's an issue for manufacturers is battery prices are still somewhat expensive. I didn't put it in here, but economists are telling us that within 3 or so years, battery prices will have dropped low enough that electric cars will be at par or cheaper than gas cars for initial purchase prices. So, so we believe that there are some manufacturers that are losing money still on their electric vehicles. So, you know, why sell them in Canada if you're going to lose money, and if you could sell them elsewhere and get a credit for it for zero emissions, right? So that's really what's driving things. Now, when battery prices are going to drop, and they will drop, they've been dropping for a while, and there's no reason to think they won't keep on dropping. We'll see manufacturers wanting to build more electric cars, and we'll see more supply.
So now, Raymond, is there any truth to the myth that I've heard that the retailers aren't super interested in selling ZEVs and EVs because the maintenance is where they're making most of their money, and they simply don't make enough money on those cars because sort of that long-term maintenance of your oil changes and all that stuff that goes with a conventional vehicle doesn't really happen. Do you think that's influencing the sort of dealers want to bring in these vehicles in any meaningful way in our city?
Yeah, absolutely. We do think that has a big impact because, as I said in the presentation, maintenance is about 70% less, and the margins on vehicles are, especially the lower price vehicles, the margins are very thin, and the dealers make money on service. So yes, you know, if they could get you into a gas or diesel vehicle, they will, in the end, make a lot more money. So it's more profitable for them.
Yeah. I read yesterday that the year-over-year EV sales in Europe, 2018 to 2019 are the latest stats. They had a 44% increase in their EV sales, simply because of their policies, sort of mandating that this is the new forward. So that, I really feel, you know, we're probably going to have a big whopper of a year like that eventually. We're just a few years behind Europe. But it's sort of time, isn't it, for manufacturers to get ready for that. And and get
yeah.
some
So
production happening here in Canada as
yeah,
well.
so Europe is an interesting case right now. The reason that sales have gone up so much is because of various regulations, including a reduction in the overall average emissions that fleets are allowed to make, right? So that's pushing the manufacturers to offer various EV options. So yes, the share has gone up quite a bit. Now in Canada, the number of electric vehicles sold has gone up. The overall vehicle sales have gone down, but the sales of electric vehicles have gone up. And if you look at provinces like Quebec and BC in particular, where there's an incentive on top of what the federal government provides, BC, I believe it's up to $6,000 incentive on top of the $5,000 federal. Quebec is $8,000. So in those two provinces, we saw some market shares of more than 10% or around 10% for EVs this year. So so market share is growing here also, but not as fast as it is in other countries that have.
Get it normal soon.
Sorry? I missed that, sorry?
I said we're on our way. I just said we're on our way to normal soon, hopefully, you know.
Hopefully.
Let's get another question in here. Mandy, what's another question from our group?
Okay, next question. What is the most repair for BEV, pricing of the repairs, and can they be done DIY?
That's a great question.
Yeah, so the highest cost for repair is actually, so if you look at my personal experience, there's been some suspension components that have failed, which is sort of normal after 260,000 kilometers. So tie rod ends, that kind of stuff, which are things that you could do yourself. The other thing that's been an issue is tires. With all electric vehicles, contrary to another popular myth, all electric vehicles are very fast, mainly because you get 100% torque at zero. So for a conventional vehicle, you have to get 100% torque, you have to rev the engine to a certain relatively high speed. But with an electric vehicle, you get all that torque at zero. So when you have that, you tend to drive faster, you tend to accelerate faster. It's just the nature of humans, I guess. And with my vehicle in particular, it's very heavy. It's 4,800 pounds because of the battery. The battery itself is 1,800 pounds. So the vehicle being heavier and the vehicle being very stable and very maneuverable tends to make you take corners faster and all that. So there's a bunch of factors that result in your tires wearing out faster than they would on other vehicles. So the biggest expense I've had is tires. And that's, you could get the tires changed where you want, right? Doesn't have to be a Tesla service center.
Yeah. And Mandy, is there another question, or did that cover the whole question?
There are more questions. No, oh, I think so. The next question is, can you integrate your calendar schedule for the car to be a part of the travel plans charged for the drive?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, so that question came up when you were talking about how your magical car heats for you in your garage on those cold days and knows your schedule. I think it's one, this person is wondering, can you kind of log, like what if you went on holidays or, you changed your schedule? This is a really high-tech thing. So I'm just wanting to know a little more about that.
Okay, so in my case, you could turn it off. So if for some reason you're going on vacation or whatever, or your habits change, you could turn it off and it won't precondition the vehicle, right? So so there's different configurations you could set for it.
That's really
great,
interesting. Electric vehicles have been around for such a long time, right? Like we're talking 100 years here. Everyone thinks they're like really brand new, but this has been a true slow roll in the truest sense of the term here. So it's really interesting that these very sort of luxurious amenities, I'm going to call them, I guess, really have been put into these EVs all of a sudden, like to really help sort of drive the comfort of them. Is it comfortable? Like, do you find in the winter, I know winter is something that really scares people in Ottawa. You know, we get out there and our cars all crusted up. And what's it actually like driving your car in the winter?
Well, so I'll talk about the heating, and I'll talk about also the range, because I think range is a big question people have. If when it comes to heating, electric cars actually heat much faster than gas cars. The reason for that, and the colder it is, the more that's true. The reason for that is that for gas vehicles or diesel vehicles, the heating is provided by the excess heat from the engine, but the engine has to be hot before you get excess heat. Right, so if it's very cold, it could take several minutes before you get some heat in your conventional vehicle. With an electric vehicle, it's either resistive heating or heat pumps, and they start heating almost immediately as you hop into the car. And like I said before, you could schedule the preconditioning, or you could have it do it automatically, either, or you could, in the morning, 5 minutes before you leave, you just tell it to heat the car and it will do it. And if your car's in a garage, well, there's no issues with the fumes or anything of that nature, right? So, so heating is much more practical,
Raymond's cut
actually.
out a little bit for me. I'm not sure, Mandy, if he's cut out for you a little bit.
So Jen, you're actually cutting out for me, so I wonder, but I'll keep on going. So that's the heating portion. If you look at the range portion, a lot of people are concerned that they will lose lots of range in the winter. Okay, can you hear me, Jen?
We can hear you.
Okay, so a lot of people are concerned that they will lose range in the winter. Now, it's true that you will lose some range, absolutely. Now, depending on the vehicle you have, so the longer range vehicle you have, the less you lose in proportion. What I mean by that is, with my vehicle that's got a range of close to 400 kilometers, I did an experiment and went to Niagara Falls when it was minus 18 or something a couple of winters ago, and I measured the loss of range. And if you're doing a longer trip, because your vehicle is warm, because the battery is warm when you get to the charger and all that stuff, you lose a lot less range. Okay, so where it counts in long distances, you don't lose that much range. I lost somewhere between 10 and 20% of range, depending on the segment that I was doing. Okay, so it's not a huge amount. Now, if you're doing shorter trips, so you're driving, 10 kilometers to get to work, and then the car sits outside the whole day, then you're taking it back home to have it sit for a couple of hours, then you're going shopping and all that. So between those trips, the car gets cold. And cars will typically, EVs will typically require batteries to be kept warm or heated to get performance and that kind of stuff. So, and the inside of the vehicle gets cold. So every time you're reheating everything. So you could see a loss in very cold temperatures of 40 to 50%. Now, that being said, that's a bunch of short trips. So by definition, you don't need a huge amount of range to do a bunch of short trips, right? So when you really need the range, longer trips, you lose a lot less. So it's not as much of a problem as people perceive it to be.
We've got a couple more questions, if I can just cut in and ask. What is the life of a battery platform? Is there a swap out program to keep the cars viable longer using new batteries?
Okay, so there's different cars have different batteries. The Nissan Leaf, as an example, Nissan Leaf is a bit of an exception because it doesn't have any thermal management, so the batteries tend to not last as long. That being said, I have a friend who just sold his 2011 Leaf and had lost, I believe it's about 10% or 20% of range. It was something relatively minor after 11 years, and that was his main vehicle. So that's a Nissan Leaf where you would get more battery degradation because there isn't thermal management. When the batteries get very hot, they tend to lose some charging capacity. And but all other vehicles have some thermal management, and my vehicle in particular does. So it's 7 years old. It's got 260,000 kilometers on it, and I've lost about 15% of capacity. Okay, and typically batteries are warranted for about 8 years, and some have a kilometer limit, others don't. In my case, it's warranted 8 years, unlimited kilometers. So it's still under warranty today. But I haven't lost very much of range. What we're seeing happening with batteries that are taken out of cars, so if my car was in an accident or if the battery ended up being swapped, what we're seeing people do is they're reusing the battery for some other purpose with static storage. Okay, so Nissan in particular, what they're doing is they're putting batteries in lamp posts actually, which have a little solar array, and they charge the lamp post with a solar array, and use it to power the lamp throughout the night, right? So what we're seeing is batteries being reused. So the actual useful life of a battery can be relatively easily up to 20 years. Okay, after the 20 years, what we expect to happen, and it's not happening very much right now because there really aren't many batteries available for recycling, but we're expecting recycling to occur. And actually Tesla just announced last week that they will be doing recycling of their batteries because it's cheaper for them to recycle older batteries than to get the raw materials from mining companies.
That's exciting. That's
I
good news.
actually have another question along those lines that ties in very nicely. Someone just asking, is there much discussion in the world of ZEVs about circular economy? So recyclable parts, battery recycling, standardizing parts to ensure the least possible waste. This could have a huge impact on the net carbon impact from cradle to grave of these vehicles.
Yes, it can have a large impact. Now, that being said, because vehicles, the looks of vehicles are changed, every few years typically, and all that, and vehicles have a lot of parts that are designed specifically for that vehicle. So reusing parts is a bit of a, aside from you reusing a full battery pack and things of that nature, reusing parts is not significantly different from what it would be with conventional vehicles. The materials will be recycled. I mean, you look at my car; it's almost all aluminum. It's really worth a lot in terms of just raw metal, so it will be recycled and be turned into another vehicle. What we expect with the batteries in particular is that they will get recycled for the vast majority of them, just because of the cost of the raw materials involved in producing them and the weight and all that. It makes it particularly it makes it a particularly good business model to get into recycling. Okay, so we're expecting virtually every battery to get recycled. So at some point, there'll be very little mining for new material, and most of the batteries will come from recycled material. What was there another? I thought there was another aspect of the question which I forgot.
I think you covered it.
Okay.
I have two more questions.
Sure.
Because we are, getting to the end. One is, can the price of the car include the home charging station too?
So that depends on a number of things. So there have been, I believe it was GM that was throwing in a charger with the Bolt at some point, but that's really a choice that the manufacturer would make. Like in my case, I wouldn't want the charger to be included in the price of the car because I already have two of them. I don't need another charger. So eventually people will have chargers independently of their vehicles, right? But yeah, there are some people who are doing that. And I know that there's some dealers who have deals on chargers also, so they'll provide you a charger at a reduced cost. Chargers are not super expensive. You're talking for a charger that's just a basic charger, you're talking somewhere between a relatively good quality one, somewhere between $650 and up to maybe $1,200 for the more expensive ones. The ones from Tesla are about $750, and the other one I have in the garage, which is not Tesla, cost me $650. So not super expensive.
I just want to add, I think it's on Wednesday, but Mandy would be able to confirm that. But we actually will be talking all chargers all the time on Wednesday's version of this speaker series. So that's a really specific speaker series we'll be doing.
Yep.
Yeah, that is on Wednesday at 2.
Yep.
I have a bit of a long question, but a good one. My condo is currently installing EV charger infrastructure to allow residents to add individual chargers to their parking stalls. The condo has asked us to identify whether we would be installing chargers from the contractor. I don't currently have an EV, but I want one. Should I wait until I get the car, assuming that chargers will evolve and improve? Is it best to get a charger specific to the make and model, or is a generic charger still okay?
Okay, a lot of questions there. So specific make and model, unless you have a Tesla, there's really no reason to go. There aren't any chargers that are, sometimes they could be branded by an auto manufacturer, but typically they're not. And all of them use the same adapter, the J1772 adapter. So there's no reason to go with a particular charger for a particular vehicle. Whether you should do it now or not, it really depends on if you could get a good deal now and you're expecting to buy an electric vehicle soon. Right? Will charger prices go down? Maybe a bit, probably not by a huge factor. I'd say the cost for you would, well, yeah, if they're pre-wiring, then installing the charger is really trivial and it wouldn't be very expensive. But if they have to do some wiring on top of that, the biggest cost may be labor and wiring. So it's really a question of, whether you could get a good price or not, and how long you're going to wait until you get an EV.
Yeah, these have been some really great questions. And of
Yes.
course, if you have any more, we have about 5 minutes left to ask anything. So Raymond.
Oh, sorry, there's just something I want to mention that I remember the other part, the circular economy part thing. Just want to talk about what Volkswagen is doing. So Volkswagen, what they're doing with their new electric vehicles, so the ID3, which is not sold in North America, but the ID4 also, which will be available in North America. What they're doing is they're looking at the full life cycle of the vehicles, from mining the raw materials to disposal of the vehicle once the life is over, and also looking at all of the materials involved in charging the vehicle and servicing the vehicle during its lifetime. And what they're doing is they're starting with their factory, and they're trying to make it net zero carbon. And they're going up the food chain, the supply chain, and trying to get their suppliers to also do the same thing. So there are manufacturers out there that are doing some really good work in trying to reduce the overall waste along the way, because that makes a big difference in the amount of carbon you end up emitting. But also, thinking about, well, when I'm designing the vehicle, how is it going to get recycled at the end? How could I make the recycling portion easier, cheaper, with less energy and less greenhouse gases? Right, so very interesting work being done in that space.
Yeah. We were talking about that before we came online, which was really, no vehicle is perfect. Every vehicle has a carbon impact, whether it's in the manufacturing or the afterlife or sometimes the energy source. In Ottawa specifically, we're very lucky to have a very clean green electricity grid. So that's why it's a really great choice specifically for Ottawa. In other places, if you have electricity, coming from a coal mine, coal produced electricity has a different impact than our hydroelectric we have here. And so we often do see that myth of, oh, it's not perfect to drive a zero emission vehicle. And really, the only perfect is walking barefoot, particularly. So
well,
this is
yeah,
a whole heck of a lot better, and it's actually convenient, and people do drive, and we need people to have a huge shift to driving in a way that really gets down that carbon emissions that's from our typical cars we're having now.
Yeah, what I find is it's very hard to get people to change habits, particularly habits that have been ingrained for decades. So, you know, I'd love to see people walk and bike to work more and take public transit and all that. That would be great. Unfortunately, most people aren't willing to do that, you know, that much of a change. So my take on it is, well, let's take the sources of carbon and replace them with devices that emit less carbon.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about coal plants in particular, and that's certainly an issue. But even if you were driving an electric vehicle with electricity that's 100% derived from coal, it's still cleaner than burning gas or burning diesel. It still results in less GHG emissions. Now, an interesting stat I just saw a couple of days ago is in the US in the last 10 years, they've reduced by half the amount of electricity that's powered by coal. So we're seeing in every jurisdiction pretty well in the world, we're seeing people going to greener sources of energy, cleaner sources of energy. So that makes electric vehicles even a better option.
Yeah,
right? So they get cleaner with time. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Someone would like to know what kind of EVs you drive, Raymond.
Well, the the EV I have is a Tesla Model S. It's a 2013 Model S. That's the one with 260,000 kilometers on it. The other one we have is a Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. So that's my wife's vehicle, and that's the second one.
So I do want to thank you so much for joining us today, Raymond. This was really interesting, and I hope everyone took away at least a little morsel of knowledge. I know I always do every time I talk to you. We'll be sharing the whole presentation online afterward, and we encourage the folks that are with us today to share it with your family and friends to help us really try to get these myths busted out there in our community. It's really the purpose of this whole Drive Green Ottawa week that we're hosting. Please join us, sign up for other workshops we're having. We're having something literally every day. Today we have 2 things. So later on, if you join us on Facebook Live, we have a drive-by demo where we will be cruising the streets of Ottawa to show people what the future of transportation could look like. So catch us online on our Facebook, EnviroCentre's Facebook at I think 6 o'clock, Mandy. Oh, yes, she's got it there.
Yes, 6 o'clock.
Yeah. And thanks so much, Raymond. It was a pleasure as always. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And actually, just one thing I want to mention before we go is if people would like to talk more about electric vehicles or would like to try an electric vehicle, there will be a trailer at the IKEA in the West End. Well, the only one we have in Ottawa, I guess. There will be there on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 10 to 5 for every weekend starting this weekend until the 15th of December. So if you want to try the vehicles there, we'll be able to accommodate you.
Yeah, we put a little link to that as well on our Drive Green Ottawa event page, so if you're interested. So great, thanks. And definitely check out the EVCO website. There's a ton of information on there as well. Thanks.